So welcome to the most interesting topic I would say, which is kind of on the top of the minds of almost everybody in HR these days, the entire concept of HR digital transformation. Though it's been a buzzword for a long, but if you really look at it now, it's on top of the mind, especially with all the advancement which is really happening in the field of technology, the AI, ML, the chat GPTs now which has come in. All of that is making a big difference in terms of our internal processes, employee experience, systems, everything. And we have seen organizations even adapting their processes towards suiting the digital transformation which is there. And there was a survey which was there by Gartner, about a few months back. And for twice in a row for the last 2 years, that investment in HR technology has been on the top of the mind of the CHROs. So almost 48%, so you can say 50% of the CHROs said that that's their biggest priority, that how do we really ensure that we have the right investment when it comes to the HR technology. And mind it, when we say digital transformation or digitalization of HR, it's not digitization, it's not just changing things, a workflow from a paper pen to a system workflow, which sometimes people confuse it to be. It's a fundamental alteration in terms of the way HR is functioning. It's a fundamentally different systems, processes, culture, empowerment, ways of working. It's a host of things which are actually together, which kind of give the right kind of an employee experience and ultimately the customer experience. So here we have the panel here. Four extremely eminent panelists who have done that, who are doing in this journey in their respective organizations. And we'll not get into too much of detail about the benefits and all. I think that's everybody knows. We'll actually get into more the practical and practitioner aspect of what are the real things to be taken care of, how things are being done, so that we have some live experience sharing around this. So we'll start with Shrikant, and the first question I would like to ask is more around recruitment, because that's the first aspect of when we look at the employee life cycle in an organization. Hiring is the first step. How do you think this entire automation is impacting the recruitment in the organizations?
Yeah, I was recently talking to somebody in my organization about use of chat in creating JDs. So that because sometimes JDs are created and they remain dormant and we keep reusing them, right? And the hiring managers want 120% of the JD fit from a candidate. And how do you structure the JDs based on actual experience of the candidates that you are hired or of the actual job? And the person said, yeah, we can do that, but candidates are also using ChatGPT to tailor their resume to the JDs that you are creating using chat, right? So technology has become completely pervasive. And one of the easiest ways where you can get an ROI on use of technology is in recruitment, because it's still a huge amount of heavy lifting. There's a lot of white spaces in the way we look at recruitment as a function. Right from whether it is pre-sourcing, which means keeping candidates ready even before you have a job, right? And a lot of organizations are doing that specifically for diversity hiring, right? Keeping candidates ready in case you have an opening, who are you going to approach? From screening, from using algorithms to, look at the right kind of candidates for your position. A lot of stuff can be automated in the recruitment space. However, there are definitely challenges in this, and organizations which have implemented it, in terms of satisfaction, you're looking at little over 50%. And the reason for that, again, is that when you use any kind of a system, right? I work for a technology company. We use a huge amount of digitization. We are moving organizations. We are doing software around this. But the huge challenge is three aspects, right? One, clean data is required for you to use any kind of a digitization or any kind of an artificial intelligence, right? If you don't have clean data, the GIGO concept works, garbage in, garbage out, right? Clean data is absolutely essential. And do we have clean data? Because they learn from that. Secondly, the bias aspects, right? A lot of times we don't look at bias at a human level, but when you aggregate that, the AI systems learn the bias that you have prevalent in the organization. So, and that amplifies it because they learn much, much faster. So, how do you put guardrails around bias in the artificial systems that you bring in? That's the second aspect. And the third one is, how far would you trust a system to do things on its own, and where does the human intervention or the leadership or the human factor come in, right? And this is something which people have had huge challenges answering. But in a very recent survey, 3 months back at a People World, they asked respondents, and 68% of the respondents said that they would rather trust a robot than trust the manager. Right. So it is moving very well towards digitization. I think we are taking baby steps, but the scope on recruitment is extremely large.
Sure. So Krupa, coming from an IT services company, how do you see that element of recruitment playing up there? And especially, and Shrikant touched an important topic of bias, because ultimately it's a tool, and tool is a coded tool, and it can happen that the bias of or the prejudice of the person who's coding it is already kind of built into the system, or the system is in an AI world learning itself, and by that it's learning the biases also. So how do you deal with that in your organization and your perspective on that?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Most important is we've been traditionally doing recruitment in a certain way. When we talk so much about automation and AI today, why are we actually doing it? Fundamental is the scalability that we can get, right? With the expectation of the next quarters from where we were to where we are moving, there is going to be significant action. And from that perspective, if you look at it, use of automation, technology was always there, but the whole generative AI, how can it really help recruitment? Some of the things Shrikant did cover, right from looking at pre-sourcing, sourcing, and looking at, probably the way the generative AI works in terms of coming to the closest fit, which probably the human eye can't catch it. But yes, if you look at somebody, the way we want to look at it, it's a huge learning process, Amit, because when we look, how is it moving? Like for example, a practical example in Zorient is we have created our own internal generative AI tool, which we call it as Orion, which we just remove the X and the T and then we named it as Orion, which we are now trying to look at certain things where it can be implemented to our banking customers. And second, we really want to test it internally by using it in recruitment. So some of the things that we're trying to look at is, rather than trying to do it as a big bang covering everything, it's over aspirational. Can we take one step at a time? So we're kind of implementing it in our early stages today, where there is predominantly a heavy rush in terms of our sourcing, in terms of the picking up for interviews, looking at bots, in terms of standard questions which candidates keep asking. And the fourth point is in terms of looking at an engagement. Video calls are another thing that's coming in, but we still have a long way to go there, and we should get there from a technology perspective, but that will take us a little while. I'm just being so upfront and honest about it. We may have so many other tools available or platforms, but this is the learning curve we are going through. Sticking to what suits your organization and how much of it is needed, so that it's not that larger organizations versus smaller ones. We need to customize exactly what we want. And bias as a thing, we try to use technology so we reduce bias, but if we really get to seeing it as our analytics that it's coming up, we really need to think through on how do we program ourselves again. So it's a continuous learning process according to me.
Sure. Maybe Sunita, maybe a follow-up on that, on this question. Especially if you're coming from Wipro and organization known for its values and ethics. Now, how do you see that element being, tested out, or ensuring that workforce which is being hired, is in line with what your culture is, what your values, what your ethos are? And do you think the automation can really help in that space, or digitalization can help in that space, or is still a human factor to be assessed? What do you see about that?
No, thanks for that, Amit, and thank you to the organizers for having me here this morning. Indeed, a pleasure to be talking to a bunch of HR practitioners in this room. So the topic is clearly interesting, and like Amit said, coming from Wipro, where we are an IT services firm, and I would say, on the technology curve, fairly fairly advanced because that's what we do to our customers. So obviously, you have to eat your own dog food before that, So everything and anything that we try with our clients, I would say, is first tested in-house. And who does the testing but your employees? So clearly to me, technology is an important factor, but an even more important factor is who you hire and what kind of DNA do they have that you get into the organization. So to me, and I heard the earlier panel where the CEO spoke about culture being important. I cannot underscore the importance of culture here, because who you hire, what exactly is the DNA that you want in them, how is integrity, how is ethics, how does all of this fit together is so critical, especially when you have a workforce of 250,000 plus, right? So even one bad apple is enough to kind of spoil the game. So how do you ensure that consistency in how you hire? And by that token, the question on the workforce, Amit, you have to have people who are tech savvy. So that's what we clearly look for when we hire, because until and unless there is that hunger to learn, there is that curiosity to know what next, we would not be winning in the market, right? So our entire workforce has to demonstrate that hunger, that curiosity for technology, wanting to experiment with it, and it's okay if you fail, because not all technologies really flourish at the word go. So you have to have a workforce which lives and breathes technology, and who's willing to kind of experiment with whatever new stuff is coming. So be it generative AI or the artificial intelligence, I must tell you, I've been probably talking about this many years before. So when the whole world was like, on a rush on this, I was like, what did we do 3 years back then? So a lot of the stuff that we've already implemented, I would say, is thanks to the employees actually thinking 2 steps in advance. And until and unless they do that, I don't think we would have made the progress that we've made with respect to especially technology in HR. So, you just heard one case study from both my panelists on the recruitment front. I think the avenues are immense, because every single aspect of what we touch, there is a better way of doing it. And until and unless you have a workforce which is willing to challenge you on how you get things done, you'll just assume that it's okay to be working in the ways that you were working 5 years ago. But let me tell you, that's not enough, because employees finally are exposed to so much of technology outside your company. Come to think of it, with a click of a button, they are able to do so much for their homes, in their personal lives. So if as an organization you're not keeping pace, you'll actually lose that crowd, because they would want to join an organization which is not tech savvy, which is not modern, which is not contemporary, right? So I think a lot of emphasis, Amit, on the search for people who have that DNA when they get into the organization itself.
Thank you. Talked about AI and artificial intelligence, and maybe I'll ask this question to you, Ranjit, and then maybe I'll ask Shrikant to respond to it after that. How do you think the decision making in the organization is changing because of the analytics and the entire artificial intelligence is coming in? Traditionally, the decisions were taken more with the experience of the leaders. They've seen the world, we have done it earlier, or somebody's vision, somebody's gut that, okay, this is what it should be. And that's how the decisions were taken based on some data and facts. With the kind of change in that, when you have so much data around you, and then you have data decision making tools available with you, how do you think, and how in your organizations things have changed in terms of the decision making? Is still very gut or experience oriented, or it's fundamentally shifted now with the data and everything?
Yeah, so thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think one thing that has happened, if you look at the decision making that has been actually progressing, and you rightly use the word data as the start point, but you don't use data for decision making. Okay, then that's what AI ML has actually brought in, right? You got multiple levels that you actually goes at, like you got data, then that data synthesizes information, then there is root cause, and there are options, and then you take a decision making, right? There are 5 levels of hierarchy through which the data has to flow. Earlier, the decision maker had to really do all these things unconsciously. And then you have to spend a lot of time, effort in doing all these things, or maybe train some people to get it. Maybe sometimes people would miss out on the important parts, or there would be biases that would creep in. I think what actually I have seen in last about couple of years in a couple of organizations that I've worked is that AI ML has been able to reduce the first 4 points, which is basically converting and synthesizing the data into information, getting the trend analysis, getting the analytics, which actually tells me what are the negative or positive exceptions that are coming in, which I as a leader need to focus upon. See, leaders today do not have a lot of time to do all the kind of synthesis themselves. So we move, in fact, we push the leaders to move from doing a general management to doing exception management. Let your first line do general management. At your level, when you're taking decisions, you have to do the exception management. And I think those highlighting points are being highlighted by the AI that we use in our organization, which actually creeps up and comes in. It could be in terms of performance management. It could be as simple as someone repeatedly taking overtime, okay, or a team taking overtime. Right now, rather than a man doing it, our AI can actually tell us, okay, there is one team which repeatedly is taking overtime for a particular period of time. Now, we could actually go back and look at what are the data points around it. And we use that to check, is the goal setting done right? Is it too high, too low? Are there certain biases coming in? Is it the inefficiencies coming in? Is it the quality that is not good enough where people have to do it? So that exception management focuses on to actually enable us to get to decision faster and to really pinpoint on that. So that's the first thing that has happened. Second, in terms of decision making, we also use it for predictive analytics. See, any decision that the leader is making will have different implications for the organizations. You'll have a cost implications, you've got people implications, you've got process implications, you've got customer implications, and you've got time implications. So we've been able to use predictive analytics to give us those implications in the multiple options that the AI proposes to us. So when the leader is taking those decisions, he or she is very clear that, okay, if we're going to press this button, it's not only the gut feel. See, understand, the scenarios that our leaders are facing today, a lot of them are not repeating. A lot of new scenarios are coming in. So going just by the gut of it and then actually putting the organization at risk is not a very sane method of doing it. So why not use it? So some organizations I've seen are preventing use of AI. Like, for example, ChatGPT, there is a lot of debate that happened that, okay, should we ban ChatGPT for the programmers or not? We say other way around. Why don't we actually use it as a lever and actually make the decision making forward? So I think that's how I see it, using it as a tool to ride on and maybe making sure that the decision making is faster and much more accurate, much more predictable. I think that's what the leaders get paid for.
So maybe, Shrikant, on this, I'll be a bit provocative on that. As they say in mutual fund industry, past performance is not an indicator of future performance. This tool which is created or any such model is based on the past, data points, past actions, and it's built on that. In the world today, which is, we call it bunny world, we call it non-linear world, we call it incomprehensible, brittle, all of that. Do you think these tools are equally important still in terms of, or valid towards taking decisions? Like, for example, COVID, who knew what's to be done? Nobody could rely on any tool or any kind of a playbook at that point of time, or nobody could rely on a tool where a ship got stuck in Suez and the entire supply chain of the world got impacted. So in these kind of scenarios which are happening, nobody predicted Russia-Ukraine war, nobody predicted Gaza-Israel conflict which is currently happening. So the world which is so unpredictable, so non-linear, do you think the AI, ML, analytics tools are the right way to do it, or still there's an element of individual, going beyond that data or going beyond what is coming up there in terms of decision making?
I think, Amit, it's not the question of either or, right? It's not a linear, bipolar choice. I think it's a question of both. There are elements which, for example, I just want to give you an example of the scale at which a generative AI can do things so that we understand the impact of the what you do. Like, we are a company which does coding, right? And if we use generative AI for looking at, let's say, test cases, right, for a module that has been created, all right? If you ask the testing team to create, the use cases, the test, number of test scripts that they write to test that software, they come up with around 20, maybe 30, all right? And they take around 2 days to come up with the scenarios of 20 to 30. A generative AI tool can create around 200 plus test cases in less than 5 minutes. Right? So the software that you're doing, the scaling of that, look at the scaling, right? even fringe cases, right? Remote possibilities can also be tested, right? And when you're doing software which impacts human lives like MRI machine, this becomes important. So it's a question of how do you actually use the technology well, right? But the question is, when you use the technology well, right, you still have the element where as a manager, as a human being, as a decision maker, as a leader, you get the choices, and the choices are something which you cannot rely on either in terms of your memory or your team's memory or the database that you have, because it can pick in data from a huge number of places and then provide you with their choices. At the end of it, it is still a human choice that you make, right? For example, I'll tell you something which happened last week from my organization. There was somebody who went to Germany for delegation for 5 years and has come back. Now the question is, we need to fix his compensation when he has come back, right? How do you fix the compensation? Now, you have multiple ways of looking at it, right? You can say that what was his compa at the time he left and what is the compa currently, just fit the same thing. One way of looking at it. One, say, go for market positioning. If you were to hire the person today from the market, what would you hire? Look at that, right? Today, when you leave it to various groups, people make their own choices of how they fix that number. Right? What is right, right? And there's no one given way which is right. Each team or even within the same organization, multiple teams do different things. But if you have a software which has looked at this data and gives you much more informed choices saying that this is the range and the reason for that based on past performance, based on what hikes the person got in Germany, which you don't have information on because you need to ask for it, but the system can crawl and get you all the information, you're able to make your decision faster. At the end of the day, if the rest of the team is at, let us say, 60 lakh salary, and the information that comes out says, pay this guy 90 lakhs, right? You still have to make a choice of what you want to pay, right? But at least the system tells you 90 is fair, but the rest of your team is at 60, so you make a choice of where you want to put this person in. Maybe the person has got specialized knowledge at headquarters, and maybe there's some leverage that you want to do. How do you want to position? At least it gives you the data. But if you allow the system to make the call, it would have made a call which you may not be wanting to live with, right? But as a leader, does it give you choices? I think that's where the impact of technology comes in, and it will never go away.
No, that's an important element, that final decisions still rest with human beings, but they give you the right kind of data sets to take the right decision. Sunita, you talked about tech-savvy workforce, in your initial comments. How do you see that as a critical driver today in terms of business growth? Is how important and imperative it is? Maybe you are in a IT services company, so it's there. Apart from that, as a general industry trend, if you really look at it, how do you see it being the most, is it still the most critical imperative or there's something else?
No, I think, see, if you are in the services industry and you're serving clients, they are looking at you to be providing them with something which they already don't know, or something which is new in the market and they want to experiment with it. They are looking at you as a partner who can help them in terms of doing that. If you have a bunch of employees who are more of order takers and who only say yes sir, no sir to whatever is the instruction given, then obviously you've limited your chances of being a true partner, with the client. So I think that's what we're trying to instill in people, that when you actually have these conversations, don't have these conversations with your brain switched off, just to say that, the client is always right. Not true, not anymore. So there are enough and more cases where the client is looking at you to be providing those solutions, and until and unless you have a workforce which is, which I said, that lifelong learning, curiosity, I think these are traits which you have to hone. So I hear a lot of college kids coming to me and saying, I'm done with that 4 years now, no more of textbooks. And I say, sorry, if that's your approach to life, then it's not a very great future that you can have, because it is lifelong learning. It is how curious you continue to stay to what the changes are outside, and how much you can actually experiment with it and implement it, in the situations that are required.
Sure. And Pranjit, since you work with Reliance, and earlier we were discussing you work with the retail part of it, and now with the new energy piece of it. And then we look at the current generation of workforce which is coming in, let's say whether it's retail or the new energy, or engineers coming from the core branches in the traditional hydrocarbons business, let's say of companies like yours. How critical is this tech element or knowledge of tech element for them in terms of organizational growth as well as their own growth? How important that is? Is it still like nice to have, or is it like a must? Without this, things just can't work?
Yeah, I think compared to Sunita's case where they actually create technology, we are users of technology. So for us, and if I look at two transitions that I have had, in retail, we are not looking at technology as a critical skill, but I'm into a new business, which is new energy, which is an evolving technology business globally, not just in India. And we Indians are actually into a completely new field, okay? So both from country as such, as well as industry as such. So it's for us, it's very, very essential that whoever I take in, because we are a technology user group, okay, has to have, we call it the digital quotient, okay, while we keep on talking about it, but for us, it's part of our competency-based interview, where in addition to the Reliance values and the functional competencies that we look at, we also look at the digital quotient. And unlike the other proficiency levels that we have a 3-level proficiency level that we test every person, because it's not about you creating a technology. You might be creating an energy storage, but how do you do it? So at a base level, in fact, the way Sunita talked about is education does not stop as soon as you are a BTech or a MTech or a PhD. So we keep on checking in last 1 year, what is the new technology adoption the person has done? What has the person learned himself at that entry level, maybe entry to assistant manager level? We look at that. So what is the person kept on learning? At middle management level, we look at how the person has looked at using technology to alter design solutions, either for internal customers or for external customers. And we keep on asking questions about that. At the topmost level, we keep on looking at how the person has used weaved technology in their solutions for their customers, which in turn make it either a top line impact or a bottom line impact. So we look at a demonstrated ability for someone to use, not only absorb technology, but use it. And I think that's very essential for me, because when we map people into competencies, we don't only map competencies for today, but we map competencies for 2 years down the line. If a person is not willing to learn, then the person will be just a baggage for me after a couple of years. So that's very essential for me, and that's how we make sure that we, at the entry level itself, we test it and then only take it.
I'll just add to it maybe, Amit, with a live case study in Wipro. You know, when Gen AI came in, we quickly got across a module created where every single employee in the company has to go through that training and get certified. Now you may ask, you know, people in the support functions who are, you know, not really using that kind of technology, why should they? And our argument was that everybody has to at least understand, appreciate, and be able to talk intelligently, you know, when people are discussing this. Of course, there are different levels. So, you know, Sunita need not be a level 3 on Gen AI. But if a Sunita is not a level 1 on Gen AI, she has a problem. So we've actually mandated that to the extent that 200,000 employees today can talk that language. So it's important that you infuse it early, right, so that people have at least a basic appreciation and a basic intelligence on, you know, what the conversation is about.
Oh, that's critical, and that's how you build that culture in the organization. Otherwise, it won't be possible. Coming to you, Kripa, on this similar piece, we talked about hybrid working models these days, and especially in IT companies, it's becoming more and more predominant. Manufacturing is still less, I would say. So how do you really build a hybrid workforce, or build engagement, build connect, build competence, infuse the organizational values in in the workforce, which is in a hybrid mode or predominantly working on a remote mode? How do you do that? What are your experiences around that?
Yeah, I think when you say hybrid, I'm sure most of them would have a smile here with the kind of, especially HR people, were trying to coax people to get to office. So each organization has a different way or an approach that they've taken. Smaller organizations, I mean, I would say where people are extremely important for the very sustenance of the business, will take a rather a little softer approach in terms of bringing in this change, because over the last 2 years, too much rapidly has moved away, which we need to come back to normalcy. So if you look at it in the last 2 years, I'm sure we have learned more ways to connect with people through the virtual world, and obviously the usage of technology. So how do we really look at it? I mean, some of the practical examples of mid-sized firms that we are trying to look at is, one is absolutely important is communication. Two is looking at engagement. Three is looking at productivity. That's the most important factor that we have today. How do you really measure productivity of an employee who is remotely working, right? I'm sure there is a heavy usage of technology there today, which it has been more of a forceful intent to actually get there, put that required software into it to look at people from a productivity perspective. And of course, when we look at the fourth and the most important for us is the data security. So these have been the larger 4 areas of focus through which we have tried to engage with employees. So what are we really looking at, right? Obviously, your all hands will happen, certain things are always there. But what are those touch points through which we can stay connected with an employee? The platforms could be, as simple as your light apps which are on your phone today, so that employee on the move is connected to know what's happening in the organization. Two, it is of course, there has to be a mandated practice of looking at people coming forward to, meetings that are happening, not the project meetings, but more to look at, the meetings from the organization, the all hands that happen, the one-on-one connects, what we could do with these people. And especially some of them have joined during COVID, have not even visited our offices. And that is where beyond all of this technology, we are trying to coax people to come to the office, because beyond everything, a human bonding is absolutely needed so that the employee appreciates the larger organization. When you look at your own induction programs today, I don't know, apart from not the form filling part of it to get the guy automated in terms of setting him up, active and alive in the system, but how does he get to know the larger organization? How does he really get to see? So there are a lot of virtual platforms or experiences we are trying to give a guy on the mobile app today. We call it as Power Light, and for the person to know a lot more information about an organization. So these are a few things we are trying to bring in, Amit, in terms of tracking these couple of things, amongst which data security is something that has been a cause of concern, and especially how do we really straighten it up? I'm sure larger organizations have far more advanced technology adoptions that have happened. Some of us are on that path, and we are getting there. And it's been a good learning for us to very quickly roll up our sleeves and make it happen.
Right. But what's your experience, Neeta, in this? Because the entire piece around, there's a technology, people can work remotely, they are saying we are productive, we are giving you what you want, my efficiency is up to the desired level. But at the same time, all big organizations are now asking employees to come back to office. We see news items being shared that if you don't come for 3 days in a week, somebody said managers can fire. All those stories or the tweets by some of the senior leaders are all coming in, in the media. That's why it's important to kind of look at for the workforce to come back. How do you balance that? On one hand, you have somebody saying, I'm giving you output, what's your problem? On the other hand, organization is saying, hey, you come inside. So are we really leveraging technology enough or not? What's the sweet spot? What's the balance according to you?
No, and I think a very relevant question for which a lot of you in this room must be dabbling with the answer. See, I have 2 points of view here, right? One is when COVID struck and you forced everybody to kind of work from home, they gladly opened their doors, the families, they gladly opened their doors so that they could remain productive. I don't think we should ever forget that, right? Today, if there is misuse happening, right, then clearly there is cause for all kinds of actions to be taken. If companies think that going back to 5 days a week, you punch in and you punch out is going to work, I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work simply because people have choices, right? Clearly, you should take action where people are slacking, right? And for which I think today you have a lot of tools to help you gauge that. But at the same breath, I will also say that if someone thinks that I can continue to be working from home all my life, That's also not acceptable. And I say this simply because there is a certain element of camaraderie that you build when you see someone in flesh. You know, we've had a lot of these conferences even during COVID, right? Sitting in my home, talking, you're talking to that tile finally, right? There is no real connection with that tile. So the human element can never be forgotten, however advanced your technology is. So I think it's only fair that organizations are saying, hey, at least come in 3 days a week, right? We're not forcing you to come all 5 days. And I think that's a reasonable ask. As long as people understand that there is something positive by coming to that work, right? By coming to that offices. Because I agree, it is daunting to brave the Bangalore traffic and travel, right? But there is also something more that you build. You know, for someone like me, I've been in Wipro for 27 years, right? So obviously, all my family friends are my Wipro colleagues. So there is a certain element of networking that happens which remains for life. And you can never ever get that by talking to a tile on your team's calls. So as long as employees and organizations understand that there is a balance, organizations to ensure that yes, I invest in the technology, I invest in those security tools, I invest in the productivity tools, and for employees also to understand that I don't misuse something which is good for me because it gives me better balance. So I think more than ever before, the focus on mental well-being has been at the highest, and it is up to all employees to ensure that to maintain that balance, there are certain advantages that technology has brought in, and you don't misuse the system.
Well said.
I want to add on a bit to it. What you said was right. During COVID, we saw a huge amount of productivity, right? When you really measure it, and when we measured it in Siemens, during COVID, 94% of our projects still got delivered on time, right? And when everyone connecting remotely. So, so people say, man, if things are working well, and there is empirical proof of that, right? So from a task perspective, yes, but there are a couple of other aspects which are soft perspectives that you can never get when you are working on a tile. Right? If I have a problem and I'm a coder, right, and I go to my next desk and Sunita is a better coder than me, I ask her for help, right? When we are discussing a problem that I have and solution that she has, 3 other people who are neighbors join in. And the kind of peripheral learning that you get when you are in office, right, you can't really get when you are working remotely. So from even learning perspective or enhancing your skill, right, it comes in very, very useful because you are meeting people. So that's one aspect which is a softer aspect. You can't measure that in productivity, right? The other aspect is opportunities, right? There are a lot of things that when you're talking, you just get that because you are in the lift together. You get that because you are having coffee together, and someone points out saying that, you know, this particular thing, ask that person, he is the right guy, right? If it happens on the mail, you are, or it doesn't work the same way. So there are soft elements which are so critical, and therefore, very much like what Sunita said, 2 to 3 days a week being in office is essential. It's not that it has to be 100%. But there's another element which is also there. Most IT companies, all IT service companies which are working, which have the ability to work remote, unlike a manufacturing organization, right? We are in India a T&M organization, a world, time and material. You bill people 8 hours, 14 hours, whatever time they work on a client project. Now, how ethical are you when you know somebody is not actually spending 8 hours on that? Can you bill that 8 hours, right? Organizations can't get a handle on that. I mean, you can punch that on your system saying worked 8 hours, but have you really worked 8 hours, right? I think there is an ethical element which also is a soft element from an organization perspective. And if you say 2 to 3 times a week, you are more sure that you are actually billing the client correctly than if people are working 100% remote. The other way is to completely move to a gig model, hire people from an output perspective, right? Change your model of employment to embrace this aspect of working remotely. And if you are able to do that, that really works, right? But then you are contractually employing people for skill. You're moving away from your regular model, and you have to be able to gear your organization again towards that kind of working.
And just a simple proof of the pudding, if people can look at your own attrition analysis over the last 6 months, and if you see the number of people who are on their way out or exited, you will see 40 to 45% of the people are people who probably joined you during or just before COVID. There is absolutely no binding or bonding to the organization, and therefore it is just pure compensation that becomes a strong pull factor. And then for them, if it's working from home, it's here or there, but if somebody is paying me more, and no matter how much of interventions we do with technology, the human interface is absolutely necessary.
Yeah. Being mindful of time, I'll just ask one last question before I open it up to the audience, and maybe Ranjit, to you. And because when we talk of technology adoption, we also think of job losses, and this has been right from the time computer was introduced. And this is a constant, kind of a talk or a constant thing which is there, that the more you bring technology, the more job losses it will really lead to. What's your take on that, Ranjit? How do you see that?
No, in fact, it's not at the time of computers. It's gone back. In fact, in the Roman times, Aristotle talked about it, that when you get a any kind of new equipment, someone is going to lose a job. In fact, technological unemployment was talked by John Keynes almost about 100 years back, the father of macroeconomics. So it's always there. It will be there. In fact, that's not. But also, if you look at the World Economic Forum reports, any of these things, amount of job losses is less than amount of new jobs created. Yeah. The space will be different. And I think that's something that people have to become aware of. And see, for every job today, there is a redundancy that's setting in. Either in terms of tasks, in terms of role, or in terms of deliverables. And for all of us out here also, and there is a simple site, everyone can Google this, is will robot take away my job? Is a site. Go there, enter any role, there is a role code to that, it will tell what percentage of this role will be lost to digitization or automation, and which part of the job can't be replaced by automation. You as an HR manager can do, a CHRO can do, CEO can do. And in fact, in our organization, we encourage employees to go and visit this site once in 6 months. Yeah, it's important. It's rather than me taking this tomorrow, you won't have a job. In fact, I can relate to an experience that I had about 2 organizations before. I was in a telecom company, and we had one role in telecom at that time. It was called as activation officers. So every new SIM card that actually is given has to be verified by someone by looking at Aadhaar card or some kind of identity proof that this person is taking it, and that the person had to stamp it. We had one activation officer per district. And then we had one fine day, technology comes in, you got remote fingerprint based Aadhaar activation where it checks it automatically. Overnight, we had to check away 600 people. Right now, that's reality. Now, if an employee can't understand this, if HR can't understand that this can happen to anyone, then we are actually living in a fool's world. So what we encourage our leaders to do is, and the HR or the employees to do is, have your own role in the entire thing. See, this is inevitable. It's actually happening. We are accepting it as happening to other areas. We are accepting that happening to your Swiggies, your deliveries, your Amazon, right? Who says it is not going to happen to you? So first of all, we actually talk about it, employees being aware of it, what will happen, find your own sweet spots, strength areas, and build upon it. Because today or tomorrow, either as a business case, proactively, or reactively because my competition has done it, organization will have to go on a step where we make it much more effective, much more efficient using any of the automation or digital tools. So rather than waiting for that, why don't we actually start doing it ourselves, start working on it? And a lot of technology companies have already created platforms around it. It could be biggies like IBM's are around it. Even in Reliance, we have something called as Future Skills Program. So for every roles, we identify what are the current skills, what are the future skills, and we create paths for people. And we say, okay, today we are employing you. Tomorrow also we'd like to employ you. We would like to have a career. But this is the way the roles are going to evolve. So we mapped how the role evolution could happen, looking at what is the business plans that we have, and let people start working on it. It's their career, they have to walk it. We have to act as enablers. And I think that's the journey. It's a collaboration. It's not about someone owning it. It's all of us own it together. It's business, HR, and employees. I think that's how we are able to make sure that, okay, we walk a path right now. Yeah, no, that's true. It's more than the job loss. I think it's a skill shift. Some skills will be redundant, but a new skills which will be there. We have just about 5 minutes left, so maybe I'll pause my questions here to the panel.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure having all of you, Krupa, Shrikant, Sunita, and Ranjit on the panel. And I hope it was a lively discussion and meaningful to the audience.